Hey, moms and dads, don't you just love when your child reminds you about a school project at bedtime the night before it's due? With Skylight Calendar, you can avoid those last minute oops moments. It visually displays your family schedule in one place with different colors for each family member, so you can eliminate those last minute surprises that upset your kids. Skylight Calendar is a Wi-Fi connected digital display that syncs seamlessly with all your calendars and visually showcases your family's schedule on an HD touchscreen. You can manage events, chores, and grocery lists on the go with the free Skylight app. This is a game changer for families like ours. And your happiness is Skylight's happiness. So if in 120 days you are not 100% thrilled, you can return it for a full refund, no questions asked. This is a great Mother's Day gift. And right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/calm. Go to skylightcal.com/calm for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/calm. So how many of you have a child in your home who is like a little cop, judge, and attorney all rolled into one? These are kids who will prosecute everyone else in the family, siblings, parents, friends at school for small things, but they're immune from them. These are kids you can tell them, like, do not put your foot up on that chair. And they will stare you right in your eyes as they tap their toe on that chair and then argue with you for 45 minutes that they didn't really use their foot. It was their toe, and the toe is not the foot. I know, because we had 1,500 of these kids in our home over the course of a decade, and this was our son Casey as well. So I want to give you at least 5 different ways to respond to these kids, these junior attorneys in your home. And that is what we're going to discuss on today's special episode of the Calm Parenting Podcast. Special for 2 reasons. One, it is my birthday, and I was thinking, what do I really want to talk about? Like, what really animates me? And I thought, oh, this topic, I love this because I think we can turn this into a positive. And then the second reason is this: we have a lot of new listeners to the podcast. And a lot of people are emailing like, oh, we missed your Black Friday sale. So here's what I decided to do. Because it is my birthday month, it's my company, I can do whatever I want. We are doing a Black Friday sale in March. Why? Because I want to. Because people will like that. Because that means more people will get our resources and stop the power struggles and stop the fights as spouses and get along with your kids. And it just is also something, I know people are always like, why are you doing that? Because I'm like your kids. I want to do what I want to do. And if I want to do a Black Friday sale in March, that's what we're doing. So let's dig into this with some different ways I used to handle this with Casey and all the kids we worked with. So you have kids who will come at you sometimes over very small things, and they're often very specific. And I really like this approach. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to agree with your kids. But the next time they put together a really kind of well-reasoned argument over something, say, hey, you know what I just noticed? Man, your argument shows that you have listened to me, that you understand what my objections are. You then came back with a well-reasoned reply, which shows a lot of strategic thinking, good critical thinking skills. You are anticipating my objections. By the way, this is what a great salesperson does. You are very persuasive. You communicate well. And by the way, you're very, very precise. And do you know, by the way, you're not going to do this in one long litany because your kids are going to be like, why don't you guys just shut up? So I get that. But what I'm saying, I'm putting this together for the podcast, but over time, in different situations, I want to point these things out. Why? Because they're all true. And the fact that your child is precise, one other time you could say, hey, you know what I've noticed lately is when you make these arguments and make your case, you are very, very precise. And what that tells me is, man, there are a lot of jobs out there that require that kind of precision: an attorney, an architect, an engineer, a dentist, an accountant. Man, that's a great quality. So you can say all of those things and still say, hey, the answer is still no, but I do respect and appreciate your thought process. And I can see how all of these different attributes and skills, man, they're really gonna help you in your life. Now that's a lot better than saying, why can't you just take no for an answer? Why can't you just be content? Right? Why can't you just be compliant and a little sheep like our other kids? I get it. I get it that they're frustrating. I do. But why is this such a bad trait? Why? Why? Look, I just pointed out probably 7 or 8 different positive aspects of that, and I'll show you in a little bit how to use that to your advantage. But why is this such a bad trait? Why does it trigger you so much? That's the real question. And as always, even on my birthday, we're going to find out this isn't really about your kids so much. So much of it is about us, and no blame, no guilt, but own it. Could it be for some of you that you were not allowed to express yourself to your own parents as a kid, and now this brings all of that up, and it's like, I got shut down as a kid? And then for some of you, it's a little bit of guilt or just wondering like, gosh, we weren't allowed to talk back to our parents. It was just like, because I said so. And so now you're struggling. Are we letting them get away with things when they're arguing like this? And I want you to deal with your own triggers. Now, next Sunday, a week from today, I'm going to do a special podcast on healing some of those childhood wounds. So that just listen to that one when that comes out. But really wrestle with this a little bit, because otherwise you'll just walk around complaining about them for the first 18 years of their life, and probably longer, about like, oh, they're a little attorney, they can never take no for an answer. By the way, it's a great quality for a salesperson. Okay, number 2. This was one of my favorites because Casey, man, Casey never walked. He marched. He marches into a room and you could see his body posture, his eyes on fire. He just wanted to argue. And I've been through this before, so I'm not going to do this one a lot, but a lot of times what he was looking for was my intense emotional engagement, because that feeds these kids. And you know what? I was just thinking about this because Casey had some of his friends over last week, and he invited me over to hang out with them because I like learning from them, and I just love his friends. They're awesome. And I was talking to this one couple, and I was like, "Hey, how do you guys argue?" Because they're both like strong personalities. And the wife said, "Well, I just want to deal with it right away. Like I want to talk about it." And her husband was like, "No, I need to go back to my room so I don't say something I don't mean." And Casey jumped in. He's like, "Yeah, I'm like her. I want to deal with it right away." And to be honest, all through his childhood, whenever we had conflict or weren't getting along, Casey would come to me. He's like, "Dad, we need to talk. We need to make this right." And so just know, sometimes I've done that a lot. They're looking for that intense emotional engagement. So I don't react to them. I just say, I know what you're looking for right now. Arguing, I'm not going to go in the courtroom, but I will go to the garage and make this with you. I'll go out and play catch with you. We'll go play guitar. Whatever it is, I will give you my intense emotional engagement, but only in positive ways. So here's what I really wanted to get to. Sometimes I would just look at Casey and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. And then I would walk away. Now, part of it was I just wanted, I don't want you to provoke your kids, but sometimes I just wanted to say that to see how his face would respond to like, you're right. And he's like, no, I'm not, argue with me. And then I would transition to, hey, I know what you're after. Let's get this in a positive way. Sometimes I would say, hey, look, here's something I found in life, Case. Relationships are more important than being right, because no one likes a know-it-all, especially wives. So that's another way that you could handle that, but don't do it in a provoking way too much. Okay, number 3, sometimes, and I can use all of these kind of in tandem, I just say like, hey, I hear you, But what are you really after? What do you really want? What do you really need from this? Because I can hear what you're asking me for or telling me to do, but I'm trying to hear what's really beneath this. And sometimes they just want to feel heard or to know, hey, your point is legitimate. That is a really good point of view. It's a really good argument. Now, I don't agree, or I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give you what you want, but I do hear you, and that you are making a legitimate case for that. And sometimes they just want us to agree with them. And that's why sometimes I would say, I do agree with you, but that doesn't mean you get to do X or Y. Now, sometimes with your kids, it's a justice and fairness issue because many of your kids have a very high degree, strong sense of justice and fairness. And that's related to that very, very busy brain. And things feel kind of chaotic and out of their control. And that's why they like to control other people, put acorns in their pockets, cheat at games, all a search for order and structure. And justice and fairness is, well, that was right, or that was wrong, and I need to show that. And it like tidies everything up in a box. And I remember at one point, I did this with a lot of kids at our camp actually, because they would get upset at the other kids. That's not fair, he got to do this. And I used to try to explain to them how life works and all those things, but they weren't looking to be convinced. And sometimes too much talking like this just doesn't work. So I remember, and a lot of this stuff I just tried based on a hunch, and then I was like, oh, that works. So looking at your child and being able to say, I hear you. You are not incorrect. You do want this. You did make your case for why that is not just or why that isn't fair. But I can't do anything about that, and neither can you. It's just the way it is. So what I'm willing to do is to discuss and problem solve what we can do with the understanding that we're not going to make it fair. And sometimes just saying, I know you want fairness, I can't give that to you. That sometimes with a strong-willed child can be very settling. And you've heard me talk about giving kids positive intensity because you know what, sometimes when we get into those long explanations, it just creates more anxiety and instability. So what about, I just remembered a cool story. Let me tell you that one. It's not going to fit into these 5, but it's a cool story. So Mrs. Calm told me yesterday, I wish I had begun drinking AG1 sooner. My stomach has felt so much calmer and I'm more regular. My AG1 in the morning provides some consistency I really crave. And that's one reason I love my AG1. It's an easy, healthy daily routine. No messes, no blenders. We put 1 scoop of AG1 into a bottle of water, shake it up, and start our day with 75 vitamins, probiotics, prebiotics, and whole food sourced ingredients. Check out a special offer at drinkag1.com/calm. Look, I've got more energy, better mental clarity, and AG1 supports my immune health. And that's why I've been partnering with AG1 for so long. Be an AG1 couple like us. AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3 and K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So check out drinkag1.com/calm to get this offer. That's drinkag1.com/calm to start your day with a win. When we moved to our home, we were quoted a cost of over $20,000 for some trees and shrubs, but we just saved 90% with fast-growing trees, and they helped us get the exact privacy and flowering trees and shrubs for our specific climate, and it's delivered right to our door in days. Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the US with thousands of different plants and over 2 million happy customers, including us. They take the hassle out of creating your dream yard. Their Alive and Thrive guarantees ensures your plants arrive happy and healthy. Plus, get support from trained plant experts on call to help you choose and care for the right plants. This spring, Fast Growing Trees has the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants. Plus, listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code CALM at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code CALM. fastgrowingtrees.com/CALM. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. So when Casey's about 11, 12, 13, he came to me and he's like, Dad, I think I deserve a later curfew. And I was like, well, of course you do. Like, it would be weird if you didn't argue for a later curfew. But I said, Case, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to decide it now, because we did have a rule in our home that any big decisions, tough problems that we had, we would take 24 to 48 hours. It was typically 48 hours, then we'll discuss it, because everybody can calm down. And sometimes after that initial kind of burst, it's like the desire for certain things goes away, and it's teaching impulse control. And I said, Case, I'm not going to make a decision now. Here's what I want to know from you. What can you do to earn a later curfew? I wanted to put it back in his court. Now, he never really came back to me and talked to me, but I noticed the next few times that he came home, his curfew had been 9 o'clock. And so he was coming home at like 8:57, 8:52, 8:58. And I was like, hey, what's up with this whole coming home early thing? And here were his exact words. Dad, I wanted to prove to you that I can control myself so you don't have to. And I was like, ooh, that's either really good wisdom or the most manipulative thing I have ever heard in my life. And it was probably a little bit of both. But you know what? When we started talking, he said, Dad, I know you're a stickler for these things. I didn't want you to have to worry about me being late, because I know my friends do that and it drives their parents crazy. So I started coming home early to demonstrate that I am responsible. And I said, Case, that was brilliant. Really well done. Your new curfew, 9:15. And his response was, seriously, Dad, I deserve 10 o'clock based on that. And I said, Case, you keep doing that, the more responsible you are, the later your curfew is. And he worked his way up there. But that was a way of handling the argument where you put it back in their court. Okay, now here's a really cool one. So you've got a relentless arguer who just comes at you again and again and again. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I remember back in the day, I come home from work and Casey's on me right away. Dad, you've got to take me to the store. I've got to get this new game. I got to get it. You got to take me. And I say, Case, you know I don't do demanding. But Dad, it's first day out. I really want to get this. All my friends have it, blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, I get it, not happening. And so I went upstairs to change and just to try to buy some time. Well, you know what our kids are like, right? They are going to, you can go up and you can lock your bedroom door. They will go outside, climb up through the second floor window and come in and just keep going after you. And so I get that. So that's kind of what he did, not through the second floor window, but he comes up. And so I remember the look on his face, and he is fully invested in this. And I remember looking at him saying, I know exactly what you want. And what I really respect and admire about you is you're persistent, because when you want something, you go for it. And you had planned out today what you were going to say to me, because you knew that I wouldn't want to do it and I'd have objections to it. And man, that is really good strategic thinking. And in my head, I was like, I just wish you would put a little bit of that energy into your schoolwork. But I didn't say it. You think it, but you don't say it with these kids. So I said, Casey, I've seen this movie play out in our home like 43 times. Here's how it works. You get an idea. You get really emotionally invested in it. You want to do it. And then you become the bulldog, the attack dog. And I really love those traits. But here's how it always ends. You keep going and going and going, and you don't hear me. And you eventually call me a name. You eventually go over the line. And so not only do you not get to go to the store to get your new video games or whatever you want, you lose privileges with your video games you already have, and you end up upset. And so I don't think you want this movie to end that way again. See what I'm doing? I'm reading life. I've been around the block. I've seen how this works. Here's how it's about to end. You're going to be upset and crying and lose the things that you like most. But I want to give you an option to rewrite a different ending to this story. See, there's that ownership piece. I'm putting this back in your court. Here's how we could do it differently. And I said, Casey, here are two things I know about you. You have a really big heart, not toward me or your mom, but toward, I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. That's true. Don't say that. But you have a really big heart because you'll do anything for a homeless person or one of your friends. And you love money because our kids, it's not a bad thing. They're like born entrepreneurs. So here's an idea. I'm going to go downstairs and get started on dinner. If you want to come talk to me, we could brainstorm 3 different ways for you to earn some money in this neighborhood with a side job. And with that money, you can buy those games yourself. And so I walked away and gave him some space and gave myself some space. Sometimes I would disappear into the bathroom and act like I was going to the bathroom or shower because he didn't want to come in and watch me, either of those things. And so it gave a little space, but I put it back in his court, and it just wasn't me getting frustrated. I can't believe you already have enough video games. Why can't you be content with what you have? Why do you always have to push me? Stop taking it personally. I want to teach. Case, I know what you want. I know what's going on. Here's a different way to get it. And this is really, really cool. Part of the reason I wanted to do this particular podcast is, and here's a shout out to my friend Max. And Max is a kid like so many of our kids, and his parents let him listen to our podcast, and then they talk about a little bit. But Max was listening to Casey's program. It's in the Get Everything package, one of the like 16 programs that you get. But one of the things Casey teaches kids is that principle. Hey, if you can control yourself, your parents won't have to. And Max went to his parents and said, hey, I want to apologize because I realize now I've just been pushing you and arguing all the time and it's not working well. What can I begin doing differently to prove to you that I can earn, so to speak, that later curfew? See, it's cool when you equip your kids with tools of how their brains work and show them ways they can be successful in doing this. It takes a little bit of time, but you know what? It takes a whole lot less time than arguing and being frustrated and sending them to their rooms. So follow those processes. The final one, which is kind of my favorite, is this. Casey was a little bit older, and he was had put together basically a PowerPoint presentation, not quite, but kind of, on why he should be allowed to go to this special kind of overnight thing with his friends. And we had been back and forth on it, and he was handling it actually pretty well. He wasn't like, you're stupid, all those things. We were having a pretty good discussion, but he was really adamant about that. And so there's a lot to this, but there's one basic question that I want to get to. But you know, one of the things I did during that time, I didn't dismiss it. Oh, you know what? It's no big deal. There'll be other opportunities. See, that's dismissive. When you're a teenager and you have a chance to sleep over or do stuff with your friends, that is the most important thing in your world. And it should be. So I would acknowledge that and say, Case, I understand. All your friends are going to be there, and you're going to feel left out and alone and maybe embarrassed because your parents wouldn't let you go to it. Like, that's hard. Sometimes acknowledging that is extremely helpful. It doesn't always solve it, but you should do it anyway. But anyway, we were going back and forth over this. And I remember we were kind of at a standstill. Now, here's the deal. I'm the dad, you're the mom, we're the authority figures. I have the ultimate say, but I don't like pulling out that just, well, because I said so. It's kind of immature in some ways, right? And so I didn't want to just call that out. And so I remember looking at Casey, and this story always chokes me up because we had battled for years and years, right? Like, it was part of my transformation of growing and him growing and us learning this together because we were kind of so much alike in some ways and so much not alike. And so we had this history, and I remember I looked at him and I said, Casey, it almost choked up there. Casey, do you trust me? And what I meant was, do you trust that I have your best interests at heart? that I'm not just doing this because I'm some arbitrary authority figure in your dad? Do you trust that I love you enough that I will sometimes say no to you because it's the best thing for you, even though you're going to be mad at me? And I'm going to risk, after all we've been through, I'm going to risk our relationship being ruptured for a few days or a couple weeks. Do you trust me? And it almost made, again, I apologize, but I can remember, this was a long time ago, and yet the feelings are there. The look on his face when he just said, I know you do, Dad. I know you do. And he walked away, and he didn't argue with me anymore. He didn't like it. He wasn't happy. But what it ultimately came to wasn't like, I won the argument, I got my way. It wasn't that. It was that there was a relationship there. There was trust there. And he knew it deep inside that I always had his back. And it was one of the more beautiful moments of our relationship where many weeks, many months later, actually, he came to me and he said, Dad, I just want you to know, a couple of my friends got in trouble that night. And I didn't want to tell you that back then, but you saved me from that. And I'm glad that I was able to trust you. And then I think he came and asked me for something else, because that's how our kids are, right? Like, it's beautiful. And then there's like, wait, you don't stop at all. So let's kind of put this together. There's so many different ways that we can use this. And you may get tired of me hearing like, as an opportunity. Next time your kids are arguing with you, use it as an opportunity to point out like, man, you listen, it's well-reasoned, you communicate well, you're persuasive, you're precise, you can use that in so many professions. You can say at times, hey, you're right about that. Relationships are more important than being right. Put it in their court sometimes. And remember that justice and fairness. No, I can't do anything about that, and neither can you. And so you're asking them to grow up and say, hey, you're just going to have to deal with that because that's reality, and I can't make everything better or more fair in life, which is a very honest statement. And then remember what my friend Max, I got to mention your name twice, Max, because this is a cool kid, but he came to his parents and said, I heard what Casey said about controlling myself. What can I begin doing around the house to show that you can trust me? And then that final question is, hey, do you trust me? Do you trust me? Remember, it always comes back to the relationship. It's not about some kind of technique. I like giving scripts, but at the end of the day, it's the relationship. So take advantage of that Black Friday and March sale. It's at celebratecalm.com. You will get 36 hours worth of strategies and insights. Anyway, if you need help with that, reach out to Casey. Thank you for listening. Thank you for indulging me. This is the podcast I want to do, and I love doing this one. So I hope you found it helpful. We'll see you on Instagram, and watch for the one next week. I think the next podcast I'm going to do on really tough discipline tools, and then on the childhood healing childhood wounds. Moms and dads, thanks for working so hard at this. I know it's really hard. You're breaking generational patterns, and I'm really proud of you, and I really respect you for it.